First, archaeologists extract DNA of ancient Israelites by aerial data. Rare First Temple period family burial opens the door to genetic studies on the true origin of the ancient Israelites. Their links to modern Jewish populations. For the first time, ancient DNA has been recovered from the bodies of ancient Israelites living in the First Temple period. Haaretz has learned. This achievement, a holy grail in the study of lost civilizations, was enabled following the discovery near Jerusalem of a rare family tomb dating to the Iron Age. So far, the collaboration of archaeologists and geneticists has been able to extract genetic material from 2 individuals, producing partial information, which is a tiny sample indeed, but it promises to pave the way for further research on long-standing questions about the origins of the ancient Israelites, their links to earlier populations living in the Levant, as well as to modern-day Jewish people. Preliminary results from the excavation DNA study were expected to be presented at a conference about new archaeological discoveries in Jerusalem and its environs on Wednesday. Haaretz has obtained an advanced copy of the researchers' paper. The conference has since been delayed due to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. This story begins in 2018, when the Theft Prevention Unit of the Israel Antiquities Authority discovered a tomb in the village of Abu Ghosh, which is right next to the biblical settlement of Kiriath-Jearim, some 15 kilometers west of Jerusalem. The tomb had been badly damaged, first by construction and then by looting, so the archaeologists conducted a hurried salvage excavation. Although only a fraction of the tomb had survived, researchers uncovered some 150 pottery vessels, jars and lamps, as well as the jumbled skeletal remains of at least 10 individuals. Archaeologists reported those interred in the tomb included 6 adults, 3 men and 3 women, 4 children, including 2 babies, 1 infant, and an adolescent. This is consistent with the high mortality rate of children in ancient times. Based on the pottery technology used in the funerary offerings, it seems that the tomb was used for a prolonged period, from 750 to 650 BCE, placing it in the late Iron Age, the late First Temple period according to the biblical chronology. The tomb is an important find in its own right. Given that burials from this period are rare and tend to be from slightly later times, generally closer to the fall of Jerusalem and the First Temple to the Babylonians in 586 BC, says Israel Finkelstein, archaeologist at Tel Aviv University and the University of Haifa. Finkelstein was called in to lead the research on the tomb as he was already heading at Kiriath-Jearim, a settlement which is mentioned in the Bible as the Ark of the Covenant before it was brought to Jerusalem. I suppose that we're dealing with a family tomb, likely from the elite of Kiriath-Jearim, whose members were buried there over a long period of time, Finkelstein says. We don't know how big it was originally, because most of it was destroyed in recent years. Together with Professor David Wright, a geneticist at Harvard University, mathematician Dr. Harry Shanis, Finkelstein embarked on a quest to extract DNA from people interred in the Kiriath-Jearim tomb. He was an ancient Jew. The technique of extracting genetic material from ancient bones, teeth, and other organic remains began to emerge over 20 years ago and has since reached such sophistication that researchers are even defining some information on creatures that lived over 1 million years ago. It is rare for bones to be preserved well after the body. Yet the ability to extract sequence genetic material from ancient remains has given researchers major insights into the origins of creatures that populations of prehistoric hominins, animals, and plants. A big question for me when it comes to genetic history far in the past, as the minds have long asked, were the ancient Hebrews inhabitants of the biblical kingdoms of Judah and Israel in the Iron Age, 12th, 6th century BCE? From which population did they descend, and how were they connected to their neighbors, the Philistines, Edomites, Moabites, and so on? Looking at the present, we wonder what is the genetic link between First Temple period Israelites and today's Jews, and which other populations intermingled with them over millennia of exile, wanderings, and persecutions. And then there is the big mystery surrounding the origin of modern Jewish groups, particularly of Europe's Ashkenazi population, whose communities first emerged in the Rhineland at the height of the Middle Ages. Was their ancestral connection to the Israelites of Europe? By the way, these questions exist independently of the political conflict of competing claims to the land. Although these issues are distorted in the toxic debate over which modern population has the greatest link to the ancestral inhabitants of the Levant. The Israelite bone. Over the years, scientists have found some indirect evidence pertaining to the genetic origins of the Israelites. More about this later, but looking at the DNA of modern Jews as well as Bronze Age Canaanites preceded the formation of the ancient Israelite identity. but direct access to ancient Israelite DNA and all the information contained therein has so far eluded researchers. There are several reasons for this. Firstly, well-preserved DNA is harder to find in the hot Middle Eastern climes, but this technical issue was partly overcome by the 2015 discovery that the petrous bone, part of the skull located behind the ear, contains a much higher concentration of DNA than other bones. At least some genetic material may survive, even in warmer weather. That game-changing revelation allowed scientists to shed light on everything from the genetic history of the earliest Neolithic farmers in Anatolia to the origins of the Philistines, the biblical enemies of the Israelites, but not much headway had been made on the ancient. It has been partly because of the rarity of ancient Hebrew graves and largely because in Judaism, excavating or disturbing graves is a big taboo. Particularly in Israel, human remains are not considered antiquities by law, and archaeologists who find ancient graves are often pressured by ultra-Orthodox groups to quickly rebury any bones they unearth.
Thank you, Biblical DNA.
It was indeed the precious petrous bone that yielded genetic information about 2 of the individuals buried there, researchers report. But before we look at the very preliminary results, we have wondered whether we can be sure about the cultural identity of the residents. It's true that no ancient Hebrew inscriptions were found in the burial confirming that the deceased were Israelites. However, the pottery assemblage is typical of what is found in late First Temple period burials in Jerusalem, Finkelstein explains. Together with Kiriath-Jearim's proximity to what was then the capital of the Kingdom of Judah, this suggests that the locals can indeed be identified as ancient Hebrews, he says.
Okay.
Of course, cultural identity and genetic background are not the same, Finkelstein adds. Genetic background can be revealed by an ancient DNA study.
Really?
Identity is about culture, geography, and can change through the ages. This is also true in the present. Just look at the population of modern Israel. There is also a question as to whether Kiriath-Jearim was controlled by Judah or its larger, often rival, northern neighbor, the Kingdom of Israel. Finkelstein's recent excavations at the site have revealed a large artificial platform at the top of the settlement, typical of the Northern Kingdom's urban planning. It suggests that Kiriath-Jearim was initially under the control of Israel, at least until that kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians in the second half of the 8th century BCE. In any case, the genetic data from Kiriath-Jearim offers a first glimpse of how directly sampling remains from the First Temple period can shed light on the history of the ancient Hebrews. Israelite or Judite. 2 sampled individuals were 1 male and 1 female. The conference paper only discusses data from the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, sections of the genome that are inherited only from the father and mother respectively. Data gleaned from the rest of the genome will be provided in an upcoming scientific publication. This is only partial data, with a more detailed paper coming in the future, Reich said. Sampling DNA from ancient Israelites is exciting, as it should make it possible to test how they relate genetically to previous groups, contemporary non-Israelite groups living today. The Canaanites begat Abraham. The highlight of the very partial results is that the Y chromosome in the man belongs to the J2 haplogroup, a group of closely related DNA sequences that is believed to have originated in the Caucasus or eastern Anatolia, a vast area including modern-day eastern Turkey, northwest Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and southern Russia. This is important because, as mentioned, researchers have already mapped the DNA of ancient Canaanites, showing that they had a strong ancestral connection to modern-day Jewish and Arab populations. That research, published in Cell in 2020, also showed that the Canaanites in the Middle and Late Bronze Age, where the emergence of the Israelite identity, descended from a mix of Neolithic inhabitants of the Levant and a group that immigrated from the Caucasus or eastern Anatolia. This migration was already in motion in the early Bronze Age, around 2900–2500 BCE, also visible archaeologically, with pottery from this period exhibiting strong influences from Anatolia and the Caucasus. It continued in the Middle Bronze Age, as seen in the study of ancient DNA of individuals from Megiddo and other places, and is evident in the mention in historical texts of Canaanite officials in the Late Bronze Age, things that are not Semitic and originate in the northeastern Middle East. Finkelstein says, while it's too early to draw conclusions based on limited data from a single Israelite sample, there's a note that the First Temple period individual from Kiriath-Jearim still carried the same genetic variations that the Canaanites displayed centuries earlier, and which they in turn had inherited from the Caucasian newcomers.
Of course.
As limited as it is, we cannot ignore this piece of evidence. There is a connection between the genetic background of this person at Kiriath-Jearim in the first millennium BCE and the Canaanites in the second millennium BCE. Finkelstein says, it's not a complete surprise because we have evidence from other lines of inquiry, but it is another small piece of evidence showing that the genetic pool is the same. Of course, at this time, we cannot
say if this is representative of what? Oh no. What does it represent? Stop on that. Representative of the entire population? Obviously not. If researchers gather more data confirming that most Israelites indeed shared this ancestry with the Canaanites, it would support something that experts have strongly suspected for a while, that in fact the ancient Hebrews descended from the Canaanites. The biblical stories stress a discontinuity in the Canaanites, often depicted in a negative light, in a pious Israelite, described as non-local, a Mesopotamian-born patriarch Abraham, out of Anatolia. Yet, archaeologists have long noted that the similarities between Canaanite and Israelite material culture, language, and settlement patterns all suggest the latter simply grew out of the former. In the last 30-40 years, there is a general understanding that the Hebrews were mostly of foreign origin. Local origin, which means they were Canaanites and became Israelites in an identity forming process that probably took a long time, Finkelstein says. This process started at the end of the Bronze Age, around the 12th centuries BCE, when the so-called Bronze Age collapse saw the destruction of multiple civilizations across the Mediterranean and the withdrawal of Egypt from Canaan, which the pharaohs had controlled for centuries. In the ensuing power vacuum, the local Canaanites formed new cultural identities around the emerging territorial entity we are familiar with from the Bible: Moab, Edom, Aram, Ammon, and of course Judah and Israel. The partial exception here being the Philistines, who do not appear or who do appear to have received an influx of Aegean migrants, so meaning they came from Europe. That's the R1B sample, the R1B 269 sample. As for the mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the maternal side, the two individuals at Kiriath-Jearim displayed two different haplogroups. One, T1A, is a very ancient ancestral haplogroup with similar counterparts already found in individuals living in Jordan some 10,000 years ago and in southeastern Europe around 7,000 years ago, says Strauss. In later samples, it is found in Iran and in those Canaanites sampled in Israel, as well as all the way to the Baltic and Ural Mountains. This suggests that this haplogroup's initial source may have been somewhere in Neolithic Anatolia or the Levant and simply spread with early farming, Shaw says. Ain't that something now? So are they saying like farming came from Anatolia originally, then to Levant, or are they saying it came from the Levant, then Anatolia? Which is interesting because EM78, EL618, EV13. That would be interesting if those were the original maternal DNAs of EL618, which is EV13. So that'd be interesting. The second mitochondrial haplogroup, called H87, hasn't been previously detected in ancient DNA samples but is found in modern-day Basques, Tunisian Arabs, and Iraqis. This may point to an origin in the Mediterranean or the Near East, perhaps in the Arabian Peninsula, he says. If so, this particular haplogroup may have spread with nomadic populations, Charles concludes. In other words, the samples from two ancient Israelites hint at ancestry from peoples in both Anatolia and Arabia. Now, I'm going to wait until I got some opinions about this. This is very interesting. Much more data and research are needed to understand how significant these results are, whether they truly represent the ancestry of the region's population at the time, and what they mean for our understanding of the broader story of the emergence of ancient Israel. So, that being said, I have some problems with this article. I mean, it's obviously it's based off of what the script for the conference is going to be from Israel Finkelstein, Errol David had, and I got no problem with his writing. The problem is the dating of Israel, the chronology of Israel used, right? That is what I have a problem with. So if y'all go on my channel, right, you're gonna find a chronology that I have posted on there. Go to the about, scroll down. It says periods in Israel. What you need to click on, y'all. Open that up. All right, so as we can see, we have the archaeological periods in Israel, right? We see early Bronze Age, middle Bronze Age, late Bronze Age, iron. Click on iron. It tells us the years right here of when the tribes of Israel or the Israelites would have appeared. So towards late 1000 BCE, towards the end of the Iron Age 1, we see the tribes of Israel, the Philistines, and the so-called Sea People, because we don't know who the Sea Peoples were. We know the Philistines were part of the Sea Peoples, but we don't know exactly the Danoi, the Shekelesh. We don't know exactly who those people were. We don't know where they came from originally. They could have came from Anatolia. They could have came from Greece. They could have came from the modern day Italy. They could have came from the Iberian Peninsula. We have no idea, is what I'm getting at. But we see the Iron Age 2 is what I want to get at. So during those datings, if we go back, the datings, we see that 700 BCE falls into what? Iron Age 2. Now, let's go down here and see exactly what it stated this article. All right. 750 to 650 BCE. I'm just saying now, is this late Iron Age 1? What is this? Is this okay? So it's late Iron Age 2, and this is a huge. According to Israel Finkelstein, this is a big deal. You have to clarify this because I don't know. Like if you just say late Iron Age, I have no idea. But if you say late Iron Age 2, it's a big deal because when I asked Israel Finkelstein about the sample in Megiddo, you know, he says, oh no, it's still Canaanite. But the irony is, if you actually look at the dating, it's a wide gap from like 926 BCE to like 1000 BCE. And if we go to, and I'm not the only one that, you know, have seen, you know, caught this, because the person that did Hoblotree info, right? If we go to that Megiddo sample, that late Iron Age 1 sample, I can. Right here. No, that's Ashkelon. Right here. There you go. He places it at late Iron 1. right? So that's 2,951, right? I mean, just pull out your calculator and calculate that. I mean, it's not too difficult, right? The year is what? 2023. So that's around 928 BCE, right? So what does that fall under? Iron Age 2. And I got no problem. So my question is, are they going to go back and do some more further research on that Megiddo sample like they did those two samples of the brothers that had the brain surgery and the skull surgery? I don't know. I'm curious about this too. Very curious about it, because the way that this is placed in the chronology is that it seems to me that Israel Finkelstein, I don't know how he's determining Israelite, Judahite. I have no idea. If it's based off of the Y chromosome of, if they're gonna come out and say that maybe there's a Judahite sample found and those samples are J1P58 and that the Canaanite or the Israelites are J2, and so be it. But I'm just curious of the difference as far as the archaeology. So is the pottery different? Is the building structures different? Like, how did they build their structures of their houses and stuff like that? Is that what's different? Is the artifacts like the bowls and stuff like that? Is that what's different? What exactly is different? And I'm hoping to see that in the paper. More clarification once the paper. I am planning on watching on Wednesday, if it still happens or not. I do plan on watching this, and obviously doing a video when the peer-reviewed paper is published. Also, when those samples are published on Professor David Rex's website, I'm very curious on those samples, exactly what it will say on Admix Tools 2, and also that Duo, the Admix Tools calculator that I use. I'm very curious of what these samples are going to represent. Like, what are they going to show their admixture? That's really big for me, because I understand they're saying that they're Caucasians and whatnot, but J2 what? Are they J2B? Are they J2A as more of like Anatolian Greek, or are they Zagros, the Iranian Chalcolithic Zagros? Like, what J2 are they? So that's my biggest takeaways. I definitely need more information, in the paper, especially the whole extracting ancient Israelites. So how do they know the different, like, I'm trying to understand exactly how do they know the difference between Israelite and Judahite as far as building structures, artifacts like the pottery and whatnot. Like, where's the difference? How do they know the difference between the two? This is what it will cover. It cover pottery, stone objects, metal objects, bone and ivory. I think it's faience, inscribed objects, stamps, and bullae, sculpture and figurines, special finds. This is what I want to know. I want to know this. I want to know the distinction between Israelite and Judahite, covering all of this. This is what I would like to know. And then I would like to know, within that DNA, how are they representing a Judahite and an Israelite? That's because this is interesting. And that would be saying, so if the Judahites were J1P58, and I'm not just saying they were one haplogroup, just like this article states. I don't think they were just J2. I believe they were amalgamation. They carried different haplogroups, including T1A, E1B1B, obviously EM123 subclade of that, possibly EV22. some G2As, maybe a R1B in there. I don't know. But the whole point is that this one sample, I mean, it's great. You don't get me wrong, you know, it's something that, I mean, I've known because I knew it before he even came out and said, you know, hey, they're representing a second millennium BCE population. How I knew it is because of the archaeological evidence from pottery and whatnot. A lot of professors from like Duke University, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, in the past have even said it, you know, that the ancient Israelites were Canaanites. So there's no surprising, but when the DNA comes out, it's going to be more like interesting of how do they make a distinction, you know, where's the difference using these artifacts, using this pottery and saying, hey, this pottery represents Israelites versus Judahites. I think that's the most important distinction I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for in this research. It's the most important for me in a ways. As far as the maternal DNA, I'm not surprised, honestly. It makes more sense that the maternal DNA would have been there for a long time rather than the Y chromosome. I think the migration of male lineages is normally it's normally the process when it comes to population replacement, where the women remain in the land, but the men, you know, there's different men that come in and just intermingle with the women that are there. No surprise by that. So it was a T1A, the H87. So yeah, I mean, let me see if I have. So I don't see DNA. So obviously we see H has been in the Levant since the Neolithic with the Natufians. And always remained in the land. This is something else I'm curious about too. If this mtDNA is related to all these other H's found in Israel. So yeah, as you can tell in the Chalcolithic, H remained in the land. Probably all far. Oh. All right. It's good. So, and obviously we see the historical Jewish mtDNA from the tomb of the Shroud in Jerusalem, dating back 1900 years ago. It carried H also. So there's no surprise. Now the other one was T1A. Alright, T1A. So let me go all the way to the top. Curious of when exactly T1A was found in ancient samples. So it looks like the Chalcolithic. I think that's the first sample right there. So this would be an interesting sample to compare to the new female sample, Israelite sample. So, and yes, I believe this would have been one of those cases where the woman originally came from Iran instead of already being in the land, compared to the H's and the N1B and the K. I think it's going to be something interesting to see. Yeah, it's going to be something interesting to see. And then the irony is, if this sample winds up being the I-4517, that sample I've made videos about. If that winds up being a Judahite sample, I mean, you know, Judahite, Israelite, I mean, obviously there's a distinction, and there's a distinction. It's not only amongst culture, like potteries and, you know, archaeology, but obviously it's covering genetics too. So there's a difference all the way around, which is, you know, I appreciate that. I'm glad that they're making the distinction other than, you know, just DNA. So I'm just looking forward to seeing it in the paper. I think it should cover questions I have. But I'm glad that I've made a video about this. I actually just saw this maybe 2 hours ago, and yeah, what are the odds this comes out the day I have off from work? Great. But you know, I've been waiting for this article. You know, I think it's more information that needs to be there needs to be more research for more samples to confirm, or to say, hey, you know, there was a difference between times, you know, from the Bronze Age to Iron Age, and, you know, later on. But anyways, you know, it's been Biblical DNA. I'm glad I was able to bring this to y'all if y'all haven't seen it, and I'm out. Thank you for stopping by and watching my video. Gone.